go ahead and fire up the recording. Thank you very much. Thanks for attending today, everybody. This is the Accelatis Essentials series. Today's topic is going to be advanced health checks for the relational databases, whether it's SQL or Oracle. They're both very similar, both pretty much the same thing. So we're going to cover those things. Today's session is going to be about 15 minutes long. Again, we want to focus on our subjects. There's no Q&A afterwards to try and keep it down to a small window to allow everybody enough room to schedule this so it's not going to bump into any of their other work. So we'll zip right along here today. We're talking about those advanced health checks, and really the health check types, there's really only 3 of them that are going to take advantage of the database connection. The first one is going to be the database health check type, and basically it's just going to tell you that the login is valid, that the database is up, and that the database server is reachable from the agent. So if those are the things that you want to check, the database health check is the one that you want to set up. We also have 2 other ones. The first one is the SQL request, and basically the SQL request is going to run a SQL select statement against some table, and the reason why you would run the SQL request is to check to see if a table is valid, to see if it's there, to check to see if a table has rows in it, and then to check to see if the table responds in a timely manner. So the SQL request is actually going to keep track of the time it takes for your SQL request to execute on the server, and it will keep track of that. But again, because it has to connect and it has to do a count, the other 2 things also are going to be kept track of. And the third health check type that we have in this RDBMS series is the SQL request scalar. And what the scalar does is the same exact thing as the SQL request, with the one difference that we're actually going to be keeping track of the number of rows that are in the table, right? So it'll keep a history of how many rows are in the table. And if you think about this in the context of maybe an HFM error log table, where you might not want that to grow over 1 million rows or whatever it is that Oracle tells you is the limit, then this is a great check to run, and you can plot and chart based on how many rows come back as opposed to how fast the table responded. Now, all 3 of these checks are alertable. So if something fails in the check, you will get alerted on it. You can also have an advanced trigger, which not only triggers on a pass or fail criteria, but also triggers on a value criteria, and that makes the SQL request and SQL request scalar very different in the way that one will alert you if the request took, say, over 60 seconds to run, where the other one's going to alert you if this table grows over, 1 million rows or whatever it is. So with those things in mind, I'm going to go ahead and pull up my test environment. There's way more things that I want to show you besides PowerPoint slides. So I'm just going to pull this up. The first step to setting up these advanced health checks for the relational database is to actually set up the database connection. So if you navigate to your Accelatis, and then usually it's Accelatis runtime. I've just renamed mine 4.0.13.73 because that's the version that I'm running. You'll see in the server directory an executable ACC account manager ex.exe, and this is where your security setup is going to be. And some people have not gone in here and done much, and that's okay. You log in with the admin account. It has all the roles that you need to do whatever it is that you're looking to do. But today, this one's important because you'll see in the administration tab the section for database connections. And it's really fairly easy. It's the same UI that you've seen in all of our screens when you're setting up a database connection. If you want to add a connection, you simply hit the green plus. And what we're going to do is we're going to be creating a connection, and we're going to give it an alias name. This connection does not have to be to your Accelatis database, doesn't have to be to your EPM database. It could be to any database, right? So if it's a SQL server, as long as you're pointing to the host name and the port, it doesn't matter what SQL server it is, as long as you have a valid login, you can get to it and you can do all these sorts of tests and checks on it. And Oracle the same way, as long as you have a TNS names Aura entry in there and your server knows how to get to that database, it doesn't have to be an EPM database. So you can get a lot of things done with this. So in here I could just alias 1, I can call it whatever I want, it doesn't really matter. but this is the name that you're going to see come up when you select it. So I hit the ellipsis on the side, and I could see that this is my screen to put in all my information. In this case, I have a SQL Server set up. Okay, I'm just going to point it to the local host. The username could be anything. I just tend to use SA because it's easy for me, and I can pick, you know, any database. It really doesn't matter. And we've got our little test here to make sure that all your connection information is correct. Additionally, with the security, you can give it a security class down here. Again, a lot of folks don't use this, but if you are using your security classes, you can narrow down the scope of this to just a very particular group of people, so that you know, maybe a test database is accessible by everybody, but a prod database you only want you know, your IT team to see or something like that. So you could set that or not, leave it at default, and that's fine too. So once I have the connection and the alias, you'll see that it gets added into this column. You can open this up a little bit, and you can see here your connection information. I won't show you the passwords, but certainly you can see what you have set up, what the server is, what the user is, and that might help you understand, okay, yeah, alias 1 is my local host logging in with the SA account. Just in the same way you created them, if you want to delete one, you put the check mark next to it, and you can hit the remove button, and that's just fine. There's just another button. You could double click on it to open up those configurations, or you can click here. I am, of course, going to go ahead and I'm going to save my changes because I want my new alias 1 to be incorporated into my health checks. So once I have my connections set up, now I can come into my Accelatis UI, and I'm going to go into health checks. And of course, I've already set up some already, but I just want to show you that when I add my new health check, it's, you know, either database, SQL request, or SQL request Scalar. It asks for the alias name and then my SQL query. So in this case, I'm going to call this test 2 because I have a whole bunch of stuff set up. But when I hit the ellipsis now, it's first thing it's going to ask me is, hey, do you have you know, a database connection here that you want to use? Yes, we want to use our alias 1 connection. I click OK, and it's going to help me out a little bit here at my select statement. Select count from some table, right? I know I'm in the HFM table, so I know HFM error log should be valid for my table. Matter of fact, if it's not, that's fine too, it'll fail. But anyways, I can just put this in, click OK, and it puts my string in here. And just like any other health check, I can give it an instance. I can say error table. Whatever it is, I give it a check frequency and a write frequency. I can have it run on whatever server I want. Click preview. Once I see that all this information is correct, I can click apply and close. And now I've got my new health check here, which in this case is a SQL request Scalar, which we know is going to actually return the number of rows in any particular table. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to show you really quick here too. I would like to be able to come down and click custom, so I can put a filter in, so I can very quickly get to any of these. I can make my own filter as well. I'm sure we've covered that in the other modules, but this gives you an idea of what's going on. And I'm going to show you my different checks in this case that I've already set up. Right, so you'll notice the difference here. I've got the regular database connection, which is just going to check to see if the database is up. You know, you can see here that it was a success. It took 8 milliseconds for it to come back with that. The next two are my SQL request and SQL request Scalar. So the request one, if you remember, it is going to tell me how many rows came back, right? So there was 2,855 rows that came back. But what it really cares about here is the execution time, right? So it took 3 milliseconds for this to go through. And the SQL request Scalar, although it's the same exact statement, right? I think if I open this up, I think what we'll find is that I've used the same thing, right? So select the count from this table. So even though it's the same thing, what you're going to see in the execution time, a little misleading here, right? I'm going to see the number of rows that came back. There's a millisecond at the end of that. it gets added to everything in this column. It doesn't really mean anything, but again, the value that comes back is going to be the number of rows. So once I have these things running and I have them checking, I can go back to my performance lab, and although we know it in theory, I'm going to show you what the checks look like when you go to look at them. So these are going to be under connectivity, and I'm going to look for my database check, right? And because the database check is running and successful, it's going to tell me how long it took for the database check to come back. And again, it's a very simple login, nothing much going on there. So you see that's what it looks like in the chart. Same type of thing if I go to my SQL request check, right? Although I'm running a little select statement there as opposed to just a login, it's going to tell me how long that select statement took. And in this case, over the last 30 minutes, I mean, it's, you know, a couple of milliseconds, no big deal. This next one is the one that comes out a little bit different. So this is the request Scalar. And if I pull that back, as opposed to the time, you could see now that I could chart out the rows that were in the table. And again, with a table like an HFM error log table, super, super useful to be able to plot and trend and look at the growth over time. And again, if you want to alert and take some action on that, I'll show you over here. I'll go into my request Scalar check here. And if I look into the properties, I would use a custom failure criteria. So once I've got this set up, now I can come over here and I have this subset of things that I can alert upon. And again, it says seconds on there, just disregard that because for the Scalar check, it's going to be talking about rows. For the SQL request check, it's going to be talking about seconds, right? So in this case, I want to say, hey, if this thing goes over a certain number of rows, let's say maybe if it goes over, let's say if it goes over 500 rows, I want it to be a low severity, but you know, if I hit 1,000 rows, then I really want to be alerted. I want to throw out a sev1, right? So I could set these things up. I'd of course have to hit preview again. I've got all my changes here. Everything looks good. I click OK. And now I've got that second layer of trigger events rather than just a pass-fail. What's going to happen now is if it goes over the rows, then I'll get my corresponding alerts depending on how I configured that. So that's really the way that you would set up these checks. Now, although it helps you out and it just sort of tells you, you know, select count from whatever, you could do all kinds of stuff with this check, with this SQL statement. SQL and Oracle might change a little bit in the syntax, and the quick tip I wanted to give you guys here is normally if a table comes back with no rows, you'll get a failure. So the expectation is that we're going to pick some table, you're going to get some rows back, and we're going to report on that. But if you get a 0 back, it actually fails. So if you want to flip-flop that, you can actually structure your SQL statement in such a way that when it comes back with 0 rows, you get a positive integer, a 1, which will make it, you know, pass. And then if there's any rows in the table, using this little calculation, it'll actually come back with some number that's less than 0, so that the health check will fail. So again, this is a quick way to sort of flip-flop the logic. And you can do all kinds of math with these numbers if you want. You can do tons of stuff. You can also, if you are on an Oracle client, there is a way to squeeze in several things like updates and selects in there. But again, we won't cover that now. This is really the basic stuff. But if you want to go ahead and play around with the SQL statements, you know, go ahead and set this up in your own environment and take it for a run and see the kind of stuff that you can do. So that's it for setting up a health check against the relational database. The next session that we're going to do next week is going to be the Environment Manager Processes and Services. There's a couple of tabs in the Environment Manager screen that I want to make sure we focus. We're going to do a walkthrough. We'll show you the functionality and all the information that you can get from those screens. So again, you can always email with questions. You can email me directly. You can email the support mailbox, but if you have anything, any ideas that you want to see in this series and anything, just let us know. We love to hear from you, and thanks again for attending, everybody. Have a great day.